Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take the hardest institutions to decode and, well, provide you with the strategic blueprint. Today, we are focusing on the titan of the West Coast, Stanford University.
And when we talk about Stanford, we are really talking about an institution that's kind of in a category of its own. It's often labeled an Ivy Plus school. It's fundamentally tied to Silicon Valley and famously nicknamed the billionaire factory.
Right.
And the numbers, they really confirm the hype. I mean, acceptance rates are just brutally low. We're talking consistently between 3.6 and 4%.
That level of selectivity it's almost fictional.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to cut through that mythology. We're going to decode the strategic requirements for two completely different worlds. The undergraduate review, which is very centralized and character-focused, and then the graduate review, which is highly decentralized and all about research. You really do need different strategies for each.
Absolutely. The critical takeaway we want you to have right out of the gate is that academic perfection, the straight A's, the top test scores, that's simply the price of admission.
It's just the baseline.
It is the baseline. We're going to show you how applicants move from just being excellent on paper to strategically building the narrative that actually compels Stanford to select them.
Okay, let's unpack this immediately. Let's start with the undergraduate track and that first academic filter. We have to talk about the data because these numbers are just staggering.
They really are. So the average admitted student to Stanford has an unweighted GPA of 3.94.
Wow, 3.94.
Yeah. I mean, that means you need a near-flawless high school transcript. If you're serious about applying, the internal data suggests you need an unweighted GPA of at least 3.75 just to pass that initial screening.
So a 3.94 average implies that if you have even a single B on your transcript, you are immediately at a disadvantage compared to the rest of the pool.
You are.
But does Stanford account for the fact that some high schoolers, they intentionally don't offer APs or have tougher grading curves?
They absolutely do, and this is where that concept of context starts to matter, even in the academic review. They aren't looking for the highest possible score globally. They're looking for the highest performance within the context of the opportunities you had.
Okay, that's a key distinction.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And it's why they focus so heavily on grades 10 and 11. They see grade 9 as more of a transitional year. The expectation is just that you took the most rigorous coursework your school offered, and you excelled in it. If your school has 10 APs, they want to see you taking a lot of them, not just the easy ones.
That clarifies the rigor part.
Right.
But let's move to standardized testing, because it's officially back for first-year applicants starting fall 2026. What are the score expectations here, especially with that kind of GPA pressure?
The test scores are just as elite. The mid-50% range for the SAT composite is 1510 to 1570. For the ACT composite, you're looking at a 34 to 35. And this is where we get our first really critical strategic insight. Using the test score as a compensating mechanism.
Okay, tell us more about that. What do you mean by compensating?
Well, if your GPA falls below that staggering 3.94 average, say you have a 3.8 or a 3.85, you absolutely must aim for that 75th percentile score.
So the 1570 SAT or the 35 ACT.
Exactly. And the reason why is because a near-perfect score demonstrates that. Well, that despite maybe some grade deflation or resource limits at your school, your underlying academic ability is undeniably top tier. It's external, objective validation of your capacity for advanced work. It can really mitigate some slight blemishes on your transcript.
So if your high school is known for being really tough, nailing that 1570 is your concrete evidence that you can handle Stanford's workload. It doesn't matter if you got a few Bs in sophomore chemistry.
Precisely. And in terms of mechanics, Stanford makes the logistics pretty easy. They accept self-reported scores for the initial review. You only need to send the official docs if you get in and decide to enroll, which is a huge help for students applying all over.
And their superscoring policy is friendly too, which helps, right?
Yeah, that helps a lot. They superscore the SAT, taking your highest individual scores across all test dates, and they also accept calculated ACT superscores. So there is a real benefit to taking the test more than once to max out those sections.
Let's nail down the timeline. We have restrictive early action, or REA, and regular decision.
Right. REA is November 1st, with decisions coming back mid-December. Regular decision is January 5th, with decisions in early April. The key thing to remember is that your testing window closes before those deadlines.
Okay.
So for REA, you have to take the SAT no later than October and the ACT by September. You have to plan your testing schedule like a year out. It's just non-negotiable.
Right. So we've established that the academic floor is, well, it's virtually unattainable for most people. So let's move past that filter. Once you have the 3.94 and the 1570, what makes Stanford choose you over the thousands of other flawless applicants? This is all about the holistic review.
This is where the human element really takes over. Holistic review means they look at the whole student, their story, their values, their experiences, and crucially, how they developed all of that within their own unique circumstances. They look at your background, your path, and significant life commitments.
You mentioned life commitments. So does an admissions officer genuinely value, say, working 20 hours a week to help your family as much as being a state debate champion?
Absolutely. And it's increasingly so. Stanford recognizes that not every student has the luxury of time for traditional resource-heavy extracurriculars. Those are responsibilities, the job, the family care. They demonstrate maturity, resilience, problem-solving. These life experiences are valued right alongside, and sometimes even above, traditional activities.
So when we talk about those traditional extracurriculars, the rule is depth over breadth, isn't it?
Exactly. You don't want a long list of fleeting commitments. They explicitly state they're looking for exceptional depth of experience in one or two activities. They want to see genuine impact, real leadership, not just showing up for a few meetings and a dozen clubs.
I remember that example we found, the Is It Cake Club. It sounds, on the surface, a little absurd. Does Stanford really reward a quirky club like that, or is that just a nice story that distracts from the expectation of, world-class achievement?
That's a great question because it forces us to look beyond the title. The Is It Cake Club is compelling because the student showed purposeful leadership and community creation.
So the activity itself isn't the point.
Right. It's the skills and dedication shown through the activity. The club becomes a metaphor for organization and passion. Stanford wants innovators, and sometimes that means someone who innovates in a really unconventional space. They want students who are going to leave a mark.
That brings us to the letters of recommendation. This is the qualitative evidence that backs up your narrative. What are the requirements here?
You need 2 letters from high school teachers, preferably from 11th or 12th grade, core subjects like math, English, science. But the crucial strategy is to pick teachers who know you well, not just the ones who gave you the best grade.
You want someone who can speak to your growth.
Your growth? Your ability to handle setbacks, your character. The best letter gives those nuanced details, not just a summary of your A's.
And the applicant has a big responsibility here to guide the recommender, right? You can't just be passive.
Absolutely not. You have to give your teachers a brag sheet. It should have your activity list, your essays, so they get the full narrative and specific anecdotes. Remind them of that tough presentation you aced or a project you were proud of. You're giving them the raw material to write a really specific, compelling letter.
Okay, let's turn to the essays. This is the strategic core. Stanford has 8 total supplements, 3 short essays, and 5 very short 50-word questions. Those 50-word answers are quick, strategic chances to show your personality, but the 3 main essays are where you prove your fit.
Let's break those 3 down because each one serves a very distinct function for the admissions committee.
Start with question 1, the intellectual curiosity essay.
This asks you to reflect on an idea or experience that gets you genuinely excited about learning. The key is that it has to be a 2-part response. There's the intellectual spark, the idea, the theory, and then the personal narrative, the experience of engaging with it. They want to see that you're intrinsically motivated, not just someone who completes assignments for a grade.
Then you've got question 2, the famous community fit essay. Write a note to your future roommate. Why this prompt? What are they really trying to figure out here?
It's extremely clever. Virtually all undergraduates live on campus in a really tight-knit community. So Stanford is trying to assess 2 things: your social compatibility and your self-awareness.
It's kind of a risk mitigation strategy.
It is. They're looking for someone who's considerate, humble, and knows how they operate in a shared space. Do you talk about how you'll contribute to dorm life, or you just list your accomplishments? It tells them instantly who you are as a person.
And the final one, question 3, is the ultimate fit test. Describe how you'd make a distinctive contribution to Stanford. This is where you have to connect your story back to what the institution actually needs.
Yes, this essay is the most strategic of all. It's not enough to say, I'm good at chemistry. You have to articulate the specific value you add and how it aligns with Stanford's current goals. This is your moment to show you're the missing puzzle piece they need right now.
So the successful undergraduate strategy is essentially flawless credentials plus highly refined, context-aware, and strategically aligned personal story. Okay, let's pivot sharply to segment 3, the graduate track. This process is fundamentally different.
It's a massive shift. Graduate admissions for, say, an MA, an MS, a PhD, they're all controlled entirely by the individual department or school. So think the School of Engineering or the Physics Department. There's no single admissions office reviewing your file. It's the faculty you hope to work with.
Which means deadlines and requirements are all over the place.
Exactly. They fluctuate wildly by department. And the centerpiece of this application isn't a character essay. It's the statement of purpose, the SOP.
And the SOP is what? The single most critical component.
Without a doubt. It's a document of intellectual maturity and alignment. It is not a high school autobiography. It has to be narrowly focused, convincing a professor that you have a serious, well-considered research purpose. Usually it's capped at around 1,000 words.
With such limited space, what is the cornerstone of a successful SOP? How do you avoid sounding generic?
The cornerstone is undeniable faculty alignment. You must explicitly identify several faculty members whose current research aligns with your interest. You have to explain not just why you admire their work, but specifically how you would benefit from and contribute to working with them.
So if you can't name the faculty and explain that intellectual intersection,
Your application often fails right there. Faculty read these looking for future collaborators, not just general fans of Stanford.
but doesn't that create a risk? If you focus so tightly on one professor, what happens if they leave or change their research?
It's a calculated risk, but a necessary one. And you should name several faculty members to show some breadth within your focus. But the risk of being generic, of just saying you want to study renewable energy, is far, far greater than the risk of being too specific. You have to prove you've done your homework.
Graduate applicants can also submit a secondary holistic statement, right?
Yes, the Enriching the Learning Community statement. It's up to 500 words. This is where you can share the non-academic aspects, lived experiences, background, values, anything that contributes to your fit as a scholar and a peer.
Let's talk about funding, because this is a fundamental difference between a master's and a doctoral degree. The reality here is pretty high stakes.
Yeah, the funding distinction is crucial. PhD students typically get comprehensive funding for up to 5 years. We're talking tuition, health insurance, and a stipend. The university sees them as long-term research investments.
But for master's students, it's a completely different story. They're usually self-funded.
Correct. More often than not, master's students have to secure outside funding or rely on loans. Departmental support is almost always prioritized for the doctoral candidates. So if you're applying for a master's, you need a proactive external funding plan before you even hit submit.
And then, standing above all of this, is the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program, or KHS. This is the gold standard for graduate funding.
KHS is the absolute pinnacle. It provides up to 3 years of full funding tuition, a big stipend, travel for any graduate degree. But it's a dual application process. You have to get accepted into your graduate program first, and then be selected as a KHS scholar based on their own criteria.
And those criteria are 3 ideals: independence of thought, purposeful leadership, and civic mindset. How do you even address that?
You need to show evidence through your essays and interviews that you're not just academically bright. They want visionary thinkers, ethically courageous leaders, and humble collaborators. It's really an assessment of your potential for global impact.
Finally, let's touch on international applicants. There's a specific trap with English proficiency testing that a lot of people miss.
Right. So you need a TOEFL or IELTS score unless you meet specific exemptions. The minimum score to even be considered is pretty achievable. A TOEFL IBT of 90 or an IELTS of 7.0.
But the trap is just beyond that minimum, right? It's about the English placement test.
Exactly. Well, you can get admitted with a 90 on the TOEFL. If you score below a 109 on the TOEFL or an 8.0 on the IELTS, you are mandated to take the English placement test when you arrive. If you do poorly on that, you might have to enroll in English courses, which takes up time, energy, and money your first quarter.
So the strategic advice is, don't just aim for the minimum score to get in. Aim for that 109 or 8.0 threshold to avoid a mandatory test and potential courses later. That is invaluable planning advice.
It's a huge detail. It impacts your whole first year. And on top of that, once you're admitted, international students have to maintain full-time enrollment, at least 12 units a quarter. You have to talk to a Bechtel advisor before dropping below that to maintain your visa status. It's absolutely non-negotiable.
Okay, this has been a complete strategic picture of Stanford. So what does it all mean? How do we summarize the 2 distinct tracks for our listener?
For undergraduates, success is about maximizing your credentials while showcasing a really compelling character and community fit through that detailed essay narrative. You have to be brilliant, but also likable.
And for graduates,
Graduate success is defined by meticulous research. It's about proving intellectual alignment with specific faculty members and demonstrating a concrete plan for scholarship through a super-focused statement of purpose. The whole emphasis shifts from personal character to your intellectual trajectory.
It truly is a game of excellence played on two entirely different fields. And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the learner. Given that the academic baseline for admission is already statistically near perfect, a 3.94 GPA, a 1570 SAT, we have to ask, how much of the final decision is genuinely about an individual's carefully crafted story, and how much is secretly driven by the university's shifting institutional priorities?
Right, because those priorities, needing more students for climate science this year, or maybe boosting geographic diversity, or balancing gender ratios in engineering, those are factors completely outside your control.
It raises the question of strategic flexibility. Is the true goal of the whole application process just to be as distinct, resilient, and academically flawless as you can be? So you're ready to fit whichever institutional puzzle piece Stanford happens to need that particular year.
Your personal narrative gets you to the table, but maybe the institutional need is what guarantees you the seat. A fascinating tension to consider.
That's a powerful final thought. Thank you for diving deep with us today.